AdLib is the DSP-agnostic buying platform to scale your programmatic campaigns smarter, faster, and more profitably. AdLib helps independent agencies and marketers deliver premium programmatic performance without the complexity, cost, or overhead of traditional DSPs. Their platform provides the tools, data, and automation to run enterprise-quality campaigns, from CTV and audio to geofencing and YouTube, all under one roof with zero trafficking headaches. Plus, they're not just a platform, they're your growth partner. The AdLib team helps you win new business, expand budgets, and deliver measurable ROI that keeps clients coming back. It's time to unlock programmatic. Join leading marketers worldwide who are using AdLib to deliver more campaigns with better results. Check out getadlib.com.
Welcome to Open Market, a podcast about building companies in the advertising industry. I'm Eric Franchi. I'm joined by Joe Zappa. And today I am going to flip the script on Joe. I'm going to interview my co-host, which is either a great idea or a terrible one because I'm not the interviewer of the dynamic duo here. Disclosure, I recently joined Sharpen as an advisor, and we're going to talk about Sharpen because I think this is a really interesting story, a case study, and a lot of learnings that people can take away. So we'll go over things like the founding story, his journey to PMF, product market fit, highlights, lowlights. If we have time, we'll get into some fun stuff as well. So let's begin. Joe, how are you?
Eric is in the driver's seat. I'm scared. My control issues are flaring up.
I'll go easy on you. Not really. All right, let's take it back to the beginning. When you first started Sharpen, what did you think Sharpen was going to be? And then what did it actually become?
As the name illustrates, initially I thought it was going to be a content agency, which is because my entry into marketing was I was a freelance trade journalist at Street Fight, which is a MarTech publication covering the location sector. And I got into this by hitting up my PR agency friends and saying, hey, you've been pitching me for years. Can I try out what you do? And so I would hop on with their CEO clients and I would, ideate content for them and write for them. And so already there, you can see the DNA of what Sharpen does in our differentiated executive evangelism model, which is all about putting the CEO at the center of communications. But obviously, it took years between when I started just hopping on the phone with CEOs and writing bylines for them and when Sharpen sort of became a full-blown communications agency centered on that approach.
So expand on what you just said last in terms of what Sharpen actually became. Because here's the reason why I'm asking. I think some people, because you're so visible and so prolific, people think you are Sharpen. But as I've gotten to know you and work with you, I realized Sharpen is a much bigger operation than just Joe Zappa.
Yeah, we have 20 clients all in the adtech industry or adjacent. We have 10 full-time team members, several of whom are like very senior, 20 years of experience in the industry. They were Bloomberg journalists, Wired journalists, head of content at Adweek and Digiday and so on. We do content marketing, PR, and messaging and positioning. So those are sort of the three branches of the service. And our offerings expand way beyond what I do, right? So for me, I do messaging and positioning. I do what we call a brand narrative exercise, which we do with all of our clients to figure out, their vision of the industry. Like performance TV would be essentially a brand narrative. But a lot of what I don't do is what the PR people on my team do, right? These are people who do the sort of more traditional component of what a communications agency does, which is, events, awards, analyst and media relations, and so on.
You're known, or Sharpen is known for CEO evangelism. And I think that is the cornerstone of the client offering and the differentiator. When does CEO evangelism click as the model and not just, kind of like an option?
So a couple of things happen here. One thing that might be interesting to the audience is, content agencies, I would say, are a pretty bad business. And that is because of AI. So people ask me all the time, and lay people outside of our industry ask me, one of the first questions when I tell a stranger what I do is they're like, oh, what about AI? And I'm like, no, actually, it's a good question. But a comms agency, a real comms agency that intervenes at the level of the CEO and is helping set the messaging and positioning for the entire company from the CEO level on down, that's not very threatened by AI, right? That is strategic thinking. It is how does everyone in the organization talk about it and talk to our customers? What's the sales pitch, et cetera? That is not very disruptable. You always need humans to play a role in that. What is very disruptable is just writing blog posts. That's part of how we transitioned from a content agency where we're just cranking out content into a communications agency where we're sort of setting the strategy and the narrative and then executing, which may include blog posts as one deliverable. Now, along that journey from content agency to comms agency, we were initially doing LinkedIn content as a very small part of our service, right? And so it was just one deliverable. And eventually I sort of had an epiphany where I was like, oh, LinkedIn content isn't like one little thing we're doing. It is actually kind of like the central deliverable. It is and it's part of this like strategic shift in how you think about communications, right? Where it's no longer about trying to get reporters to cover you like PR was for, half a century. It is about empowering the CEO to speak directly to their audience. And so as a channel, social moves from the periphery into the center. And that's something that most communications agencies are still really struggling with because it's just not what their people do, right? They have a lot of senior PR people who have spent their entire careers cultivating relationships with journalists. And so if you go to those PR agencies and you tell them, actually social is the future now and it's all about directly what the CEO says to their audience, you're threatening their experience. And so most PR agencies have an institutional and sort of personal reason not to shift models.
Yeah, I recently told someone who, asked how they can get more coverage, how they can get noticed by the reporters that are covering their space. I said, just start posting more.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, that's what like the Vanderhooks, for example, at Vian will tell you, right? Is they'll say, we started getting more queries when we started posting more on LinkedIn, right? We became like the way to, it's kind of like anything else in life. It's like if you ask a matchmaker for dating advice, they would tell you like the answer is to be more interesting, right? Like if you are more interesting, more people will want to come to you. And that's how marketing works too. Like if you are saying really interesting stuff on LinkedIn and you're driving the discourse, you will also get more reporter queries because guess what? Reporters are getting their information from what they're reading on social, just like everyone else. So if you crush it on social, you reach your audience directly and you reach reporters anyway because they want to know what you have to say.
Exactly. So is that what is most broken about, agencies and PR agencies specifically that you think Sharp Pen solves and does better?
Yeah, I think there are two main problems with PR agencies. One is the distribution approach is outdated. And again, they are spending way too much time and money sort of begging reporters to cover their clients, which, any PR agency must undertake that humble work. And we do too. But I think it should be a minority of the work you're actually doing. I think the main work should be working with the CEO to come up with an interesting narrative and then getting it out on first party channels. And I think those channels are social, email, and audio. So you should be, posting on LinkedIn and maybe Twitter, maybe even Reddit. You should be doing a newsletter and you should probably have a podcast or at least a strategy for going on other people's podcasts. I think the other error, in addition to distribution, is narrative building. So let me give you an example, Eric, of why comms is really undervalued. Let's say a CEO goes on your flagship podcast with Ari, the Marketecture podcast. They're getting in front of a few thousand ad industry professionals. Let's say, they're CEO of a DSP, and there might be anywhere from 1 to 300 people listening who are really in their like target audience, like organizations that could buy from them. In that moment, the CEO is getting the chance to give essentially a sales pitch and to reorient the way those 1 to 300 people who could buy from them think about the industry and why their solution might be necessary. Think about the value of that. If the sales pitch is completely on target and the CEO speaks eloquently about what is wrong with the status quo, how their customers are being underserved, and how they're changing the industry to their benefit, they might start 5 to 10 sales conversations worth millions or tens of millions of dollars, right? That is the difference between great comms and bad comms. And let me tell you something. Most CEOs who go on that show, it's not very good, right? And it's not, sorry. It's not because they are not smart, charismatic people. It's meandering. It's like, tell me about your vision of the industry, tell me about your company. And then it's like, well, in the year 2004, I was doing this. And I'm like, look, bro, I was in elementary school in 2004. I don't give a shit. Just tell me what you do now. And so you need to have a crystal clear vision, as I'm trying to articulate now for my own company, of what is wrong and how are you changing it to the betterment of your customers. And if you have that, comms can drive millions of dollars in value, and you're not going to worry about what you're paying your PR agency or the salary of your VP of comms.
One more question on just the Sharp Pen model, because I think this is super interesting. What is like an engagement look like? What does it actually look like versus what people might assume from looking, outside in and seeing a lot of the CEO evangelism stuff?
I think calibrating the amount of work that is necessary on the part of the client is important. I think people probably get it wrong in both ways, where some people think it's like a switch, right? Like, oh, I'm just going to hire this agency and then I'm going to have like a stream of content and I don't really need to do anything. That is incorrect. But also, some people probably think it's more work than it is, right? Where they think like, oh, I'm going to have to, like people ask me all the time in the sales process, do you actually write the content for us? It's like, of course we do, but some people, they don't necessarily realize that. So what it actually looks like is you start working with an agency like ours. In the first couple of weeks, we're going to do a brand narrative where we have a set of questions we ask every client to figure out what is their vision of the industry, what do they do differently than anyone else, whom are they championing, et cetera. And we weave that into a narrative, which is a 3 to 4 page document that should be the basis then of all content and communications. And this document, it should be tremendously valuable because it's not just like LinkedIn posts or blog posts. Like this should be how the CEO views the industry and the company's role in it. And it should influence, the sales pitch, the website, and everything, every other communication the company undertakes. And then once we have that narrative, then it's really the week in, week out work of meeting with the CEO and the head of marketing and talking about what's going on in the industry, creating content in their name to get that vision out there. And then, of course, undertaking all the usual marketing communications activities like liaising with the press, events, awards, et cetera, that just makes the company feel like it's everywhere, which I think is really the holy grail of marketing distribution.
Okay, awesome. All right. So we've talked about origin and talked about model. I want to talk a little bit about your experience, Joe, as a founder, and then kind of product market fit, which we've talked about previously. I forget what we had some sort of funny analogy.
Product market fit is like porn. You know it when you see it.
I was not going to use that word as this is a family show, but yes.
That's what we said.
Yeah, that's what you said.
And that's my role in this relationship.
Yes, sir. Having done the pod and kind of been near you for a couple of years now. Your business has just like taken off. It's been very fun to see. So think back, when did you first feel the real product market fit? Like when the way we've spoken about it previously on pods, like what was the signal? And then for your business, what did it look like?
It took like 3 years. We had a certain level of success almost immediately, but the initial success was really based on just being good at writing, right? Again, initially it was sort of a content agency and it was just like, hey, we can write really well. I understand the industry. Also, when I say we, at that point, it really was I, right? So it's like, I would hop on with CEOs. They were like, okay, this guy's, smart enough. He understands what we're doing. And so that got us to like where this could be like a viable living for me and I could have a couple helpers. But really when it started to take off was when we arrived at the CEO evangelism model, which I didn't immediately call it that, but it was when I realized, no, we're not a content agency. We are a communications agency, which every scaled company has and should have, with a differentiated approach. And the differentiated approach primarily hinges on this approach to distribution. And I think there's a really important lesson there because the thing that differentiates you, it needs to be very simple and very memorable, right? Like I tried tons of things before I landed on CEO evangelism.
What did you try? We'll come back to this point, but like things you tried that didn't work.
I tried like early on, like something I had was like I had done a PhD, right? And it's like I tried like the background of my team. Like I essentially tried like we're smarter, which is like, it like may or may not be true, but it's like you can't really differentiate on that. It's not really like salient enough and it's a little subjective. If you try to say like we're more strategic or something, that like maybe you can land that, but again, it's a little wishy-washy. Another thing that took a long time is like really going all in on ad tech. Like in the beginning, I was sort of floating around ad tech, martech, B2B tech. Tons of companies say this where they say they're in B2B tech. And I've said it too. And it is true that most of what I say about ad tech can be applied to other B2B tech sectors, but B2B tech is very broad, Sure. And so if you really, I think when you nail positioning and then product market fit is when you combine a niche with a POV. And that is what we nailed around 2024, 3 years into the company, is we had the niche, which is being all in on ad tech. And to this day, we're one of the most specialized ad tech communications agencies with 20 clients, all in or adjacent to that industry. And then on top of that niche, we had the POV. So now we're like one of, 5 to 10 ad tech PR agencies. And then we're the only ad tech PR agency that has this pitch around executive evangelism. And it was that and working with CEOs who really gravitated to that allowed the business to take off.
Got it. Okay. You brought it back to that point. Thank you. But 3 years, I actually don't know if I knew that you were doing this for 3 years. You just kind of, again, popped up in 2023 from my perspective.
Yeah.
Exactly. Word in 2023.
Was born a beautiful bald baby, a cherub of ad tech communications.
Right. In those 3 years, just, thinking less around product market, but more as a founder and like how hard this stuff is. Was there a moment that you considered like pivoting or shutting it down?
No, I never considered shutting it down. I would say the main thing is I struggled at times with the niche. I think I hear this from every founder, right? Where they have some sort of niche in mind, but they're like, is it too narrow? And the answer is usually no. Like, actually, it is better to be narrow. If anything, it might not be narrow enough, but it can take a while for that to take hold because you need to go build a reputation in that narrow niche, right? And so for me, it just took a while before I realized like ad tech was really it. And I needed to be talking about ad tech all the time. And then I needed to find the relevant people in that niche to sort of build authority with. And once I started doing that, and our relationship's obviously reflective of that is when it took off. It was sort of a combination of like distribution, like being really present in ad tech, LinkedIn, and X, and then POV.
Got it. What would you do differently in year one to just speed this thing up and get to the point where you were at in 2024?
Yeah, I think if I were starting another agency, I would immediately think about that niche plus POV combo. And then I would reverse engineer the distribution strategy. So I would say, okay, what is a niche that seems vulnerable or ripe for transformation? And then who are the influencers and how do I get in front of them? So you're essentially doing for, the agency what we do for our clients, which is you have to think about reputation building.
All right, let's get into highlights and lowlights. How is this interview going, by the way? Do you like this?
Yeah, I like this. I like Gove eating.
Yes, you do. All right. You have 20 clients. You've had a bunch of clients. What's the client win you're most proud of? But not just the logo, because you've got like the who's who, but like the outcome, right? Like, the job that you did for the client.
I mean, I think it clearly has to be TV Scientific being acquired by Pinterest a few months ago. I mean, obviously we played a small role in that. That's a, giant endeavor by Jason, Emily Robinson, and team. But we really got Jason doing a different mode of marketing than he had ever done before with fully leaning into executive evangelism. He took to it really well. He, posted on LinkedIn, at least once per week, something really substantive. He started a newsletter and he would always show up to the weekly calls, just super engaged, ready to talk about what was going on in the industry. And I think Jason's like a fantastic example also, because in addition to really creating the performance TV category, which is now like a really vibrant category, not only including them with the massive success of the exit to Pinterest, but, Vibe, Mountain, Streamer, other companies. I think Jason is a great example also because he's not like a ham, like I have other clients who are just like naturally, like they were made for like the spotlight and they love being out there. Jason isn't really that way. Jason's like an operator and an engineer, like a builder, but he also had a ton of knowledge about the industry. And when we were able to work with him to, persuade him of the value of executive evangelism and then sort of get him working through the process, he really took to it. And so I think that's an example of they had an undertapped asset from a communication standpoint, which was this really smart CEO who would take to executive evangelism if given the opportunity, and they seized it.
Yeah. The takeaway is there's just no excuse not to, because you can find the channel that is most comfortable for your CEO. If they never want to be on video, if they never want to be on podcast or on stage, like that's okay.
Right.
So that's the highlight. What's the hardest thing that's happened? Like a mistake, a client that didn't work out, like some sort of blow up? What's the low light in the sharp pen trajectory?
I think any startup goes through a process in the beginning where maybe you think you're ready for something that you're not. So one thing that occurs to me is early on in I think 2023, I thought we were ready to hire sort of like a director of operations and for me to try to offload that. And part of the reason for that is if you own a service business and you hire a business coach, the first thing they're going to tell you, like a business coach bot, will be like, you're probably spending too much time on operations. Like you need to get out
Yeah.
of that. But that's not always right. Like sometimes it's like the business just hasn't matured enough. And like it's sometimes it's not failing to achieve its potential because the owner doesn't have enough time to spend on marketing and sales. It's not always a time issue. Sometimes it's like a relationship issue or an audience building issue or whatever. So I think we just weren't really ready to take off yet. We hadn't arrived at that niche plus POV formula, and I didn't have enough of a reputation or an audience in that niche. And that is why we were sort of hovering for a while at like a lower level, which was like for a while we hovered around the like, million in revenue mark. And so I tried to hire a director of ops. It was too soon and it did not work. Right. And it was like, I still needed to be with the clients. I wasn't really ready to delegate that. And then also I had all this time for marketing and sales. But again, the time wasn't the issue. So I think that something that is great about being an entrepreneur is you learn a lot, you go through stages, your job keeps changing. I hired two business coaches with like more than 2 years between them. So I had one in like late 2022 to 2023. And then I have one that I just hired like a few weeks ago. So over 2 years between them. And the new one, he's great and he's coached tons of agencies, but also he had that instinct of like, do we just need to get you out of operations? And I was like, well, there's some truth to that, but it's also not exactly right. Like it's not exactly what is like holding back the business to whatever extent it's being held back. And so I think that is a fun experience for me as an entrepreneur is being able to see across the span of 2+ years, like my ability to engage with an outside expert to say, okay, I understand why this is your hunch about my business, but actually your hunch might be wrong. And let me steer you in a better direction.
That's fascinating. What motivated you to get a business coach? And you've had two business coaches. I think that's fascinating. It's not discussed enough. Many of the highest caliber CEOs, like present company included, like I know use business coaches or exec coaches. And, as a former and, still trying to be athlete, like I use coaches. I know you use coaches for your training. Like what motivated you to get a business coach and why is that not discussed more?
I know it should be discussed more. I think that just like I was saying about like a great comms person for a CEO operating at scale, like should easily be driving millions of dollars in revenue that might often not be attributed. I think, the same is true for a business coach. Like many of these people, their fees really are very reasonable, right? Like it seems like a lot if you're, an average person, but it's like if you're the CEO of a company doing, millions and millions in revenue and they charge you, $1,000 an hour, they should be driving enough of an impact that it makes a huge difference. So I hired them for very different reasons, the two coaches. The first coach, I was plateauing. And I was in that service business entrepreneur period where you kind of get stuck around like 100K per month or whatever. And you're like, how do I get beyond this? And so they needed to teach me business 101. And I think that any first time founder should be talking to that kind of expert. Then this time it was totally different. It was the opposite. It was like the business had exploded. And I was like, I'm suddenly dealing with a lot of kinds of issues I've never dealt with before, And so I needed someone who had seen these issues, who had grown an agency way past the point I'm at now, and also coached, hundreds of agencies in a similar position to expedite my learning. Like I didn't have time, as an entrepreneur, you have to go through certain things and you have to learn them through a, drawn out process. But there were certain things that popped up in the past 3 months where it's like, yeah, I don't have time to muddle my way through this. Like I need someone to give me sort of shortcuts, right? And sort of help me understand what I should be doing and also intro me to the right people. That's the other thing. The more scale you start operating at, who your accountant is can cost you a lot of money. So you really, if you can find someone who can point you to the right people, that can be a tremendously valuable intro.
That makes perfect sense. Have you ever fired a client?
In a sense, yeah. I have had clients where it became obvious that we just weren't the right fit for their needs. So something that could happen, for example, with where we are now, like we have grown a lot and we want to be doing what I talk about. We want to be working from the CEO level on down to figure out the narrative strategy of the company and then drive their distribution strategy and work directly with the CEO on that. So we are not going to be a fit if you're just like a marketing manager and you're like, I just need you to chop up some content, you know? And you honestly, you just shouldn't, it's not just because like I don't want to do it or my team doesn't want to do it. You just should not pay us what we charge to do that. You should go find like a smart content freelancer. You should go find me 4 years ago to do that. And so I have had clients where either in the sales process or sometimes we get hired because I think they want that strategic value. And then we start working together and it turns out they just don't really want that. Like actually they kind of just want someone to chop up content. And in those instances, I might, pull the CEO aside and say, really like you, would love to work with you if you want what we do. But if you don't actually want what we do, you're better off with a lower tier provider. It'll save you a lot of money. And so let's, just go in that direction.
Let's say outside of SharpHead, because all SharpHead clients crush it. Who in adtech is doing CEO evangelism exceptionally well right now?
I think what's really interesting is that this model seems to be taking root. And it is true that CEOs with whom we're not working directly are clearly doing this. And I'm going to take a little bit of credit for that and say that I think that CEOs who are our clients, like the Vanderhooks, getting out there and communicating directly via LinkedIn, I think has inspired some other CEOs who are very prominent to do the same. So I think like when you see like Jeff Green, obviously it's sort of wartime for TTD and you see them out there, it's not just him communicating very aggressively, like other members of his executive team are doing the same. And so it seems like they have had a shift in communication strategy to sort of meet the moment and avail themselves of modern distribution channels. And I think that's very interesting. Obviously, doing it optimally requires a great narrative, right? And that is where I think they're still fine tuning it. But what I think the CEOs who do it really well do is they have a sweeping narrative about what's wrong in the industry, how their customers are being underserved, and what the future of the industry looks like and how they're going to take it to that place. So you see TTD, for example, talking a lot about objectivity. I think that is like not super interesting. Like, I don't actually think that the advertisers they need to win or maintain confidence with are necessarily going to stick with them or choose them over their competitors because they're talking about objectivity. I would actually, like if I were doing it, I would rather see them do something more like what Viant has done and talk more about like a vision for AI and what like the future of autonomous advertising is. So yeah, that is an interesting nugget about sort of like how you do it well. But I think from a distribution standpoint, they're onto something and they're making the right choice around being more present on social and driving the audience directly. And it's funny because they keep criticizing the trade press. And it's like, I wouldn't personally like make criticizing the trade press a tenet of my communications, but they are right that you don't want to depend on the trade press. So, weave your own narrative and let it drown out what, Adweek might be saying.
It also gets people talking.
Yeah.
That's an interesting point, right? So there's narrative and there's being interesting, provocative, right? And trying to win attention. How do you get CEOs to say things that maybe make them uncomfortable, go against their more conservative instincts, like things that they would never say in like a, kind of vanilla press release? How do you get that out of people?
I think our process draws it out of a lot of CEOs organically, because I think if you are like press releases, it's a great counterexample, are often like drawn up by committee and they're just like 12 people are editing them and they're just like, written by ChatGPT and they're just naturally very formulaic. I think when the communications of a company come directly via live conversations with the CEO, most people are actually much more interesting than a press release when you talk to them. And so I think generally you're able to tease out more interesting points of view that you can get them to co-sign because, well, they said it, right? The other thing is if you have that narrative, right? If you have that view of the industry that you've agreed on in the beginning, you can then bring that up to them and you can sort of offer them that POV. So if I know a company's narrative, I should be able to look at any story in the industry and say, hey, I think our take should be this, because this is how our narrative aligns with the take on this topic. And then you just get the CEO's buy-in. So you're sort of, the agency should be able to get you, 50% of the way there. And then the CEO puts their own spin on it.
Is there anybody you ever had to like dial back the opposite, where it's just like, whoa, let's think about this?
I don't really dial people back. I think most CEOs are, which is partially my brand, but it's also like, I think most CEOs are too conservative. It's actually very rare that a CEO is like too aggressive. And if they're too aggressive, that's really on them to pull back or like, hey, if they're a public company or whatever, then like it could be on legal. But it's like, I think so many comms people view their job as preventing the CEO from saying anything interesting. And I think that's insane. Like I think the danger is much more often a lack of visibility, which comes from being boring, as opposed to being controversial.
All right, Joe, you and I have been working together now for 2 years now across the pod and other collaborations. This is coming from what you just said in terms of the natural instinct for many CEOs or CEO types or X is being conservative. Have you seen me communicate differently over the couple of years that we've been collaborating?
I think you have a talent for making things relatable. You know everyone and have a very intricate view of the ecosystem. That's actually feedback I get all the time. I think Jeremy said that when he was on the pod. He was like, Joe, you like make things so simple. And I think some people, I don't know, I think that's a great thing. Like
Cool.
I think most comms people, when I talk to them, it's a word salad, right? And I'm like, I don't know, tell me the three things I should give a shit about. Tell me the three things this company does or cares about. I think the other thing, Eric, is yeah, maybe you also from being an operator and being in the ecosystem and knowing a lot of people you might not want to offend, you also maybe would have been more conservative in the past. And I feel like maybe you've gotten like a little more like aggressive or like loose over time, which I think is a good thing. Would you agree with that?
I think so. I think so. That's a good point. Is that your recommendation for me moving forward to get even more loose?
Yeah, let it rip.
Let it rip.
Yeah, I think that we've joked many times about like I'm like the Ryan Russility or Bill Simmons, the colorful. You're the straight man, I'm the colorful one. But yeah, I think it's a lot, and that comes with the ability to have a good, informed, and sometimes controversial take, and it's worth just letting it rip.
Got it. Okay, I'll think about it. Let's bring it home. Where does Sharp Pen go from here, Joe?
We've done really well with that niche plus POV combo, and what I would like to do is to have an even bigger role in driving the ad tech discourse and in working with some of the CEOs who are most foundational to the fabric of our ecosystem. So we've already been able to work with some CEOs who are very much part of that, or are part of like the ad tech vanguard who built this industry, and I'm very proud of that. And there are others on the list, and I would like to extend my tentacles further throughout the ecosystem and work with more of those CEOs. And I would like to see executive evangelism become, the default model for communications for this industry. I think you already see that, like TTD totally embracing like executive evangelism and being out there on social and writing, CEO blog posts. To me, that is an example, and there could be very few better examples of executive evangelism taking root as the default approach to communications. I'd like to see every public ad tech company take a step in that direction. And we'd obviously like to be integral to that transformation. And then from there, there's no reason this needs to be limited to ad tech. For now, I think we want to play where we're strongest and where we know the industry best. But ultimately, certainly the vision for Sharp Pen would be to bring, once we have conquered ad tech, to bring this POV to other sectors.
Joe, this has been fun. I like interviewing. You should let me talk more.
Oh yeah? No, I can't. I can't do that.
Joe, they listen to your pod, but in case, and they probably follow you on socials, but in case somebody wants to learn more about all this stuff, where should they find you?
Come talk to me on X. I'm so lonely there these days. Not enough of you are on there. So Joe_Zappa on X. And then, of course, LinkedIn, and my email's joe@sharpenmedia.com. Hit me up, folks.
Amazing. Cool. Joe, this has been fun. Thank you for doing this. Thank you for being in the hot seat. We'll return to our regularly scheduled program next week. In the meantime, we'll see you, everybody.
Thank you, Eric.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.